this town is as large as the largest towns of California, and that we abound in wives, maidens, and children, that society and fashion flourish in happiness and finery.
Dear Father and Mother, we are getting on very well. We have our firewood and most of our grub in for the winter, and about 30 pounds. And after working only 10 months, have paid our debts. It would take a long time to make that much in Auckland.
Production of the Nevada Experience is made possible in part by the Nevada Humanities Committee, who invite you to join them in their support of public television. Additional funding comes from the members of Channel 5.
Good evening. Welcome to the Nevada Experience. I'm Travis Lynn. It's not too difficult to picture the men of the Comstock Lode, the hardworking miners, the swaggering capitalists, nervous investors, merchants, teamsters, priests, saloon keepers. These images, though part of the Western lore we grew up with, are stereotypical and limited. But even more limited are the images of Comstock women. Like 19th century Western women in general, they've been portrayed as the very virtuous wife, the Calamity Jane type hellraiser, or the soiled dove, the woman gone bad. These stereotypes are changing. New research reveals a surprising picture of women's significant role in the economic and social development of the American mining West. It's clear now that as men invented and developed a large-scale corporate mining industry on the fabulous Comstock Lode, the men and women together built a city to match it. Then who was the typical woman of the Comstock? She was the mining camp prostitute, the Irish serving girl, and the woman of means raising money for schools and churches. She was also the wife of an injured miner, taking in sewing and laundry to make ends meet, the accomplished dressmaker, the busy mother, the lodging house operator. In this episode of the Nevada Experience, A Quiet Contribution, Women on the Comstock, we bring you some of the women who enriched one of the richest places on earth. The Comstock, with Virginia City at its hub, was renowned in the late 19th century as a financial and cultural center. It was for a time the second biggest community in the West, with a population of up to 25,000, mostly men, but with significant numbers of women. However, the notable women of the Comstock, whose names are common knowledge, are few. Their stories are familiar, fitting the stereotypical images of Western women provided by novelists and movie makers. Julia Boulette, the famous prostitute, made more famous by her murder and the hanging of the man who did it. Marie Louise Bryant, a poor widow who married a young miner and soon enjoyed fabulous wealth as the wife of one of the greatest Comstock millionaires. Eily Oram Bowers, a Comstock opportunist who ran one of the first lodging boarding houses in Gold Hill. She and her husband made a fortune later and spent it all. And though these colorful women were real, they were far from typical, and in no way should they be seen as accurate symbols of all the women in that place at that time. There were so many more.
They don't know that this town is as large as the largest towns of California, and that we abound in wives, maidens, and children, that society and fashion flourish in happiness and finery.
Miss Mary Walter begs leave to inform the ladies of Virginia and vicinity that she has just arrived from New York and will open today with an entirely new stock of millinery and fancy goods.
Dear Father and Mother, we are getting on very well. We have our firewood and most of our grub in for the winter, and about 30 pounds. And after working only 10 months, have paid our debts. It would take a long time to make that much in Auckland.
During 3 years, we had, according to our vocation, consoled and comforted the distressed, visited the sick, and helped many a destitute one.
In the 19th century, if you look at the novels and the advice literature and the sort of the equivalent of the popular magazines of our time for the 19th century, a lot of them have to do with an image of women as being that civilizing influence. Women are presumed to be the goddesses of the hearth, the people who set the tone in the home, whose example is the one that the children are encouraged to follow, and who provide a haven for men who might otherwise, out in the rough and tumble public life, might lose some of the morality and virtues and civic mindedness that was necessary for the Republic to survive. So there's a very high moral authority given to women in the 19th century.
Eillie Cowan set up a canvas tent in Gold Hill in 1860 where men could pay to sleep and eat. After she and her husband, Sandy Bowers, hit a rich claim, they lived a lavish life in their Washoe Valley mansion. But in 1860 and 61, she was a trendsetter, a woman entrepreneur making good on a boomtown opportunity.
Because there were so many men living in these places, in many cases single men, women who could provide domestic services were able to actually find a lot of business. You know, they really were playing an active role in the economy. It's just that because it was secondary to mining, you don't read about it that much.
Bunks with hay beds were let at $1 per night, or $4.50 a week, and the favorite lodging house, known as the Astor, had 18 bunks in one room 20 feet by 12.
The population was exploding. In 1859, when rich ore was discovered, about 500 people were on the Comstock. There were 15 houses, plus dozens of tents and shanties. By the time of the census in July and August of 1860, the rush to Washoe had pushed the population to 2,500, mostly men. Fewer than 120 of them were women. By 1861, according to newspaperman Elliott Lord, Virginia City had 25 saloons, 9 restaurants, 7 boarding houses, and 1 hotel.
The unmarried miners live commonly in lodging houses, of which there are 22 in Virginia City. 6 are built of brick and the remainder of wood. They are plain buildings, 2 and 3 stories in height, with an average floor surface of 45 by 75 feet. A hall from 6 to 8 feet in width extends through the house usually, with apartments on each side.
And I think the reason it was important for women to run these places was that they were providing surrogate homes for all of these men who were, single. Sometimes married men came out without their families, so they were far away from home. They were there to try to make as much money as they could, but they did need someone who would provide a home, who would feed them, who would clean their clothes, mend their clothes. In many cases, the lodging houses became the place where they could find all these services.
Women were raised to run households. Now, with promising business opportunities at hand, or the need to support oneself, it was a matter of extending those skills to the commercial sphere. Mary McNair Matthews, a widow with a child, arrived in town nearly broke in 1869. She lodged in various places, ran a home school, took in laundry, did sewing. Matthews saw another opportunity when she rented a small house.
Then I moved to A Street to a house with 4 rooms. Here I fitted up 2 rooms to rent and asked $12 apiece for them. I paid $12 for the house.
Matthews ultimately built a large lodging house on C Street. By 1880, women dominated the business. At least 80 women operated lodging or boarding houses or took in lodgers at home. Just 21 male operators were in that business. Most lodging house operators were white middle-class women, and the majority of them were single, widowed or divorced, making a living by necessity. As women of their time, they were typically concerned with maintaining respectability in the raw society of Western mining towns. They were also stretching Victorian limits toward the next century.
They're not stepping outside the bounds of domesticity. I mean, they're still providing functions that a woman in a single-family home would provide for her family. But because they're in a place where the demand for these services is so great, they can start pushing the envelope a little bit and really take on a greater role.
The women who ran lodging houses were essential. The Comstock lodging house operators not only bolstered the economy by providing much-needed housing, they also brought an element of refinement to low-cost commercial lodging.
I think for these women who took in lodgers, they helped build the place. They helped make the mining camp a mining town and then even a city. So there were women right from the start with their canvas tents, renting beds, as early as 1860. And the women who are successful, or at least the successors of these first women, are then able to run more substantial lodging houses. Whether without them the mining town wouldn't have happened, I don't know, but they certainly were part of what became Virginia City. They helped build some of the fabric that still stands.
The popular image of Virginia City is that it was a place of all men who came here and had a wonderful all-male society where they enjoyed life and then went down to the red light district to enjoy life even more. And when you start really looking at the specifics of this place, you see that in fact the place is much different from that. The women who first arrived were shrewd entrepreneurs, and many were wives who took care of children and made money through this and that, but pieced together a life with their husbands and tried to build a community. That was the first domestic scene on the Comstock, and it blossomed into a larger part of the community than Hollywood allows for and popular image allows for. And in fact, Virginia City quickly became a family town with lots of children and women playing a dynamic role, all sorts of roles.
I never lived in a place where the people dressed more richly or more extravagantly than in Virginia City. It is not only a few millionaires who indulge in it, but every woman on the Comstock who has a husband earning $4 or $6 a day, up to the superintendent who gets his $500 or $1,000 a month, Mary McNair Matthews.
Within 10 years after the discovery of gold and silver, Virginia City had 40 dressmakers and 15 milliners, more than the city of Denver. There were scores of seamstresses and sewing girls. By 1880, at least 218 women were working in the individual production of women's clothes. Most were young, single, and self-employed.
Typically, women were taught to sew. It has sort of been part of our job for many generations. And in the 19th century, clothing, of course, was very difficult to come by, so that a woman could make a living by making clothes.
Menswear was made by tailors, and by this time a good deal was available ready-made in the dry goods store. But ladies' wear was too complex and personalized for mass production.
They were complicated. They were not a simple cut. A t-shirt today is basically 2 pieces. A bodice in the 19th century could be 6 or 7 pieces, maybe 10. It could be very complicated. And then, of course, the more detailed a garment was, the higher status you were. So if you wanted a sophisticated garment, it had many pieces. It had ruching, it had trim, it had lace, it could have embroidery, it could have beadwork, all on top of the general construction.
Had the Comstock been a more typical mining camp, the needle trades may have been limited to the purely practical, work clothes, ore bags, towels, sheets. But this was a fashionable society, and many of its citizens were wealthy and status conscious.
People paid attention to the way they dressed. They wanted to look within the norm of the 19th century. It was important to be well dressed and to have a fashionably adorned silhouette. It was very important.
This meant needleworkers were in great demand. Many women and girls did their own sewing at home, but those who could afford it and who required more fancy clothing turned to the Comstock's milliners, dressmakers, and seamstresses.
The high-status occupation was that of milliner, and that was a woman. They were all women on the Comstock that were involved in the millinery trades, and they were the ones who fashioned headwear. They fashioned very, very detailed headwear. Then the next occupation was dressmaker, and a dressmaker was probably, in our terms of thinking, the most skilled, because in the 19th century, typically, a dressmaker would have to create the pattern piece and cut out that pattern and size it to the wearer.
Sewing machines were being used on the Comstock, but hand stitching was considered superior. And since all women were taught to sew, one could become a seamstress or sewing girl at any time there was a need to bring in income.
A seamstress was a woman who literally stitched seams. She sewed the garment together and finished the seams. And it's something that today you don't even think about, but on the inside of a garment were very detailed seam finishes. And so she would do that. Then was the sewing girl. And unfortunately, we don't have a definition for that. We don't know what it was. I probably assumed that it was a woman who had some stitching ability, but really didn't see herself as highly skilled in the needle trades.
The Comstock's dressmakers didn't put down roots. Few stayed longer than a couple of years. But collectively, they contributed to a vibrant economy, and their work was visual proof of Virginia City's reputation as a sophisticated city of the time.
We have club parties and public balls interspersed with private card and dinner parties, and we are all very gay and fashionable, exhibiting our diamonds and laces to the eyes of rival mine and millmen's wives and daughters, with as much eagerness as would a New York or Parisian belle. Louise Palmer.
I think it's important to point out that the men who arrived here wanted to build a community, and they encouraged churches to be built. They encouraged preachers to come here. They wanted to build schools, and they wanted to attract families. They wanted this to be a stable community, and they worked toward that as much as they could. However, when women did arrive, the men, in the sexist nature that the frame of reference that they had in the 19th century, relinquished many of those roles to the women. And so the women did form the building blocks of the community.
And appeals were constant at our doors, some asking the kindness lost when a parent dies, others to receive care they never knew before because of their poverty and distress. Limiting all to absolute necessities, we made place for them, but more room and more money than we had was needed.
It has been said that everyone who journeyed to the mining West was an opportunist, for the most part seeking wealth or adventure. But the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul came to fulfill the directive of their community, to carry physical and spiritual comfort to the sick and afflicted.
What they had to offer, I believe, was their love and caring, and the fact that they were religious people wasn't half so important as how they felt about helping people.
When three sisters arrived in October of 1864, a single large room awaited them. It became their residence, a school, and an orphanage.
We opened school on the 18th of October. In 1 month, we had 90 children. We're in the house 20 in all, 3 of whom are orphans, the parents separated, the remaining ones boarders paying what they can.
Among those who knew that not everyone was getting rich in Virginia City was Father Patrick Minogue, pastor at St. Mary's in the Mountains. Minogue was determined to bring the Daughters of Charity to the Comstock.
He did his training in Paris, where he encountered the Daughters of Charity. Then he did some of his work in Ireland, where he encountered the Daughters of Charity. So he had this personal interaction with the daughters, and he noticed one biggie was that they could go where other nuns couldn't go. They could visit homes. They could take care of the sick in their homes. They could do what nuns couldn't do. What nuns needed special dispensations for, these women had as part of their rules. He wanted flexible women who were used to working hard. And there was another order that wanted to come to Virginia City. He said, no, I want the Daughters of Charity. So he was extremely insistent, and he wrote over and over before he finally got them.
We have in the house 25, all of whom, with the exception of 5, pay. The price varies according to the means of their parents. I would have more, but no room. We have in the school 112. I think there are about 20 of that number free. If we had more room and 2 more sisters, it would be a great help.
With Minogue's help, the sisters sought financial support. They contracted for state funding in 1867, and their orphanage became the Nevada Orphan Asylum until 1883, when the state opened its own orphanage. Other funds came from boarding school students who could afford to pay, and from a generous community.
The people of Nevada are extremely liberal and very kind to the sisters. In the late fair given by the ladies in Virginia City, they realized $16,000 for the orphans.
Mrs. Timmons, Mrs. Kellogg, Mrs. Hanrahan, Mrs. Foley. As it would but depreciate the devotion of the donors to attempt to offer a suitable acknowledgment in words, we shall but assure them of our sincere gratitude, while we shall instruct the little ones to pray for heaven's choicest favors for their kind friends.
In January, a fair was commenced under the auspices of Mrs. S. Herman, Mrs. Baldwin, Mrs. Stewart, Mrs. Bryant, Miss S. Matthews. The sum realized was over $28,000. We had 3 different buildings erected in 3 years.
Mine owner John Mackey was a constant benefactor, and his wife, who had once taught at the sisters' school, donated land for the hospital the sisters built. St. Mary Louise Hospital opened in 1876, another major undertaking for the Daughters of Charity in Virginia City, another indication of their commitment to this mission.
You measure how important you think a city is by how many what we call houses are in that city. Daughters of Charity do not call them convents, they are houses. To have 3 operations, 3 basic houses. Actually, it was 2 houses because the school and the orphanage were together, although they were a huge conglomerate of buildings that each time they'd add on more buildings. And then way at the base to have a hospital, a full-flung hospital. And then they waited 9 years before they would send them up there to make sure they did the job right and well. Says there was a lot invested in Virginia City. This to them, for the community, was an important place. This was a very important place.
Of all who came to Virginia City, the Daughters of Charity were among the most committed. They stayed 33 years. In 1897, the number of students and patients had decreased so much that the sisters closed their houses and moved on to other missions.
I think their influence is still here. I think it's still part of the strength of the church. People that ever heard of the Daughters of Charity really feel like their presence is still felt here in town, in the church.
May those days ever be a lesson to me in many ways. Those days when I lived so near to God in my duty.
Without the prospectors, miners, capitalists, financiers, and so forth, there would have been no Virginia City. And similarly, without the women who came and settled here and were part of families and the boarding house industry and so forth, there would also not have been a city of the same sort that actually grew up here. It's not to say there wouldn't have been something, but it would have been quite different. It would have been the kind of familiar mining camp that we have a lot of in the 19th century, which was an evanescent sort of phenomenon, generally a male population, often located in places where the deposits played out fairly quickly so that it didn't develop into a permanent community. And that was a different place than Virginia City, which was, after all, for a period of many years, a vibrant, large, sophisticated city.
Virginia City today still reflects the complex makeup of that once powerful community. And among the physical reminders of its remarkable past is testimony that the legendary Comstock was as much a product of its women as of its men.
If you would like to learn more about life on the Comstock, we recommend the following books. Comstock Women, The Making of a Mining Community, edited by Ron James and C. Elizabeth Raymond. 10 Years in Nevada, by Mary McNair Matthews. and A Kid on the Comstock by John Taylor Waldorf. Videotapes of A Quiet Contribution, Women on the Comstock, are available for $19.95 plus tax, shipping, and handling. To order this or any other Nevada experience, call Channel 5 during business hours at 784-4555.
Production of the Nevada Experience is made possible in part by the Nevada Humanities Committee, who invite you to join them in their support of public television. Additional funding comes from the members of Channel 5.